Hey everybody, Zero with another watercooled simulator battle video. And this time I will fly the famous Zero, to be exact the A6M3 Zero at battle rating 3.7. The version with clipped wings, which I prefer because of the slightly better roll rate and diving speed. Having the clipped wings reduces the wing area a bit, so it won't turn quite as well as other Zeros, but it still turns better than pretty much anything it will face, like one would expect from a Zero. The M3 also has a slightly stronger engine than the previous M2 version, with a maximum of about 1100 horsepower output. However, the engine will overheat quickly when you open up the throttle fully, especially at the usually hot Pacific maps. The maximum continuous is more like 800 horsepower. Another improvement the M3 gets over previous Zeros are the Type 99 Mark II cannons, which come with 100 rounds per gun instead of the 60 round drums of earlier Mark I cannons. The secondary armament are the typical two 7.7mm Type 87 machine guns with a rate of fire of 900 rounds per minute. Now, that is a bit slow for rifle caliber aircraft machine guns of the period, but it is still a lot faster than one would think from the sound they make in War Thunder. In War Thunder, the Japanese light machine guns have a very unique hammering sound, which sounds like they fire at a very slow rate of fire, about 400 to 450 rounds per minute. They don't. Both in reality as well as in-game they fire 900 rounds per minute, twice than what you would expect from the sound they make, which is simply wrong. The in-game sound seems to be based on a World War I Vickers water-cooled heavy infantry machine gun. I guess the sound designer could not find reference material for real Japanese machine guns, but read somewhere that they were similar to a Vickers aircraft machine gun, which they were, so he looked that up instead, not realizing that you will find as little or less reference material on those Vickers aircraft machine guns, and that what he did find was a very different gun from the trenches of World War I, which had, other than the manufacturer, not much similarity with the later Vickers aircraft machine guns or the Japanese ones for that matter. Anyway, I just wanted to mention that in case you wondered why the Japanese rifle caliber machine guns sound so different in War Thunder than all the other machine guns of that caliber. And I will link an example in the video description. Well then, let's talk about the Zero in general a bit before we take a look at the fight in it. Now, the Zero is an interesting plane in War Thunder. It is one of those planes which will face mostly superior planes throughout the entire tree. At the lower battle ratings because of the very high battle rating of the Zero compared to the planes the Zero is fighting, with planes like the Corsair, Lightning or LA-5F being on the same battle rating than the first A6M3 Zero. And higher up the tree with the M5 for example, because at this time the plane was really facing superior planes most of the time. Yet unlike some of the other fighters in War Thunder, the Zero never gets any battle rating handouts because that is the case. Strange, especially since I might break some hearts here, I don't consider the Zero to be a very effective fighter. It is just too slow to be one. Now, despite that, the Zero was one of the planes that used to do pretty well in the past most of the time, though I get the feeling this is slowly changing as of late, and I will explain why I think that is shortly. The Zero was of course right from the start designed to turn as well as possible with, and for a monoplane fighter, incredibly low wing loading, which is something the pilots very much demanded at the time, not just in Japan. As a result, the plane had to be as light as possible, and the Zero is of course an incredible achievement from an engineering point of view here. Getting a fighter of this size, the Zero is quite a bit bigger than the Bf-109 for example, to be as light takes some doing, especially considering that the Bf-109 is also considered a very lightweight design, smaller but still heavier. On top of its great low-speed maneuverability, its lightweight also gave the Zero a good climb rate and an exceptionally long range, which is very important for a carrier fighter, and was useful in the Pacific with the long distances between islands. Here the Zero could strike at ranges most Allied fighters simply could not. Not much of an advantage in War Thunder though. However, that maneuverability and range came at the cost of speed, while other contemporary designs were going the opposite direction, putting speed as the primary goal that needed to be achieved above turn rate. The small and lightweight engine of the Zero does not put out a lot of horsepower for a radial engine, and there was never a real replacement available in that size, and the Zero's super lightweight airframe can't just accept a larger, heavier one without extensive redesign. So the Zero speed never got too much improvement over its service life, making sure it fell further and further behind on that front. Something that is of course magnified in War Thunder by the battle rating system, making sure even the earliest Zeros will face planes at the same battle rating that outperform it by a significant margin, if flown at least halfway correct. One thing in which this Zero will of course outperform everything with only one pair of wings is turn rate. If an opponent is considerate enough to turn with you or fly low and slow enough that you can force him into a turn fight, you will win. However, having this ability as a turn fighter as your greatest strength has one significant downside, and that is, turn fighting is a bad idea if you plan to not die. Now, I like a good turn fight. It is fun, you can really put the maneuverability of your plane and your skills on the controls to the test, but it is also a bad idea. The thing is, even in a plane that is as good at it as the Zero, being in a tight turn fight means, first of all, you're focused on one target for a prolonged amount of time, losing situational awareness, so you are a very easy target to pick off for everybody else that happens to come by. And even though the Zero, thanks to its light weight, can turn pretty energy efficient at low speed, a turn fight will still often leave you low and slow, again easy pickings for faster and higher planes, and this makes it hard to disengage from a fight once you're in it. So, to sum it up, even if you win a 1 vs 1 turn fight, it is in general just a good way to get picked off by somebody else, and therefore turn fights should be avoided if possible. Which means that the Zero is great at doing exactly what you don't want to do. Also, I feel that lately you get more and more opponents that will use the superior speed of their planes to keep their speed up and fight in the vertical, compared to say a year ago. Now, I think there are two reasons for that. First being, well, people do seem to learn. And the second one, I think, is the improved graphics engine, which makes keeping track of opponents when doing vertical maneuvers a lot easier than it used to be. And one big reason why many people refused to disengage and climb away was because they felt if they do so, they would never find the target again. This has been fixed with the new engine, and I think more people are willing to stick to maneuvering in the vertical as a result. Now, the Zeros do have of course a good rate of climb, which is good because in my opinion having an altitude advantage is more important when flying the Zero against the faster opposition it generally faces than in most of the US fighters like Corsairs, King Cobras or Lightnings when flying against Zeros. Now, many of you will probably say now, wait a minute, isn't it the exact opposite? That's common knowledge in War Thunder. Well, I have a bit of a different opinion. Let me explain. Now, first of all, altitude advantage is of course always an advantage, no matter the plane, that's why it is called an altitude advantage. And not having the altitude advantage does not mean not having altitude, there's a difference. Of course you don't want to lawn mow in your US fighter if you expect to do well, but let's say you fly on 1000 meters in your Corsair or P-38 Lightning and you see a Zero coming down behind you from 2000 meters. Really, the only thing you have to do to get away is put your nose slightly down yourself and the Zero can't catch you, and that's it. And you can happily open up the distance and fly away. Of course that is if you see the attacker in time, not if he is already 20 meters behind you and happily blasting away at you. But in that case you are in a bad spot no matter the plane. If it is the other way around though, and say you fly in 1000 meters with your Zero and the Corsair is diving on you, you can't get away. All you can do is maneuver to evade fire, which causes you to lose speed. If the pilot in the Corsair knows some basics, he won't maneuver too much, and when he doesn't get a shot, just zoom away, come around and attack again, and you again have to evade. And if the guy in the Corsair knows how to do that without wasting energy unnecessarily, he can do that all day long and you can't get away. You don't have the speed to do so. In most cases, you soon have more enemy planes diving down on you, being drawn in by the tracer fire. Now, you can play a bit of energy vampire in your Zero and hope the enemy plane gets impatient and makes a mistake, but if the enemy pilot just refuses to get impatient, he again can do that all day long and you are doing evasive maneuvers all day long, and that is assuming the attacker isn't the greatest shot and doesn't hit you. And that's why, for a fighter, speed is king, not turn rate. And the point of that long-winded explanation is to explain why I fly like I do in the upcoming match. Now, observing Zeros both on my team and the enemy team and flying them myself a bit, I found that just playing turn fighter with it rarely brings great results. Tons of okay results, but rarely really good ones, because as soon as you do like Zeros do and go turn fighting, you are a target for every Corsair or P-38 that comes by and dives on you, and once committed to a fight in that way, you generally have trouble disengaging from it, because you don't have the speed to do it. so the conclusion when turning just gets you into trouble, I'm just going to avoid it. Instead, I try to use the climb rate to get above the fight and do high speed as this gets for the Zero diving attacks, commonly referred to as boom and zoom. So, let's take a look. This round takes place on the sideband map, and I climbed to a little over 3000 meters coming from the carriers. As far as I can tell, there are no higher planes than me at the moment, so no reason to go higher than that for now, and I approach what appears to be a fight to my front. One of the planes in front of me dives away, coming by to my left below me, and taking a closer look, it turns out to be a Corsair, doing a high-speed attack on a lower flying plane above the island. Now I decide to go after the Corsair, hoping he will pull up steep after his attack and I can intercept him while he climbs past me. Though here the inferiority of the Zero in the vertical becomes very apparent. Even though the Corsair started out below me, as he climbs back up he flies past me and climbs above me. Even with the speed I have built up in my own dive, I can't quite get close enough to attack. I, however, am not sure if the Corsair has seen me. The plane does have a nasty blind spot directly to the rear, so I keep climbing after it. We are in a pretty steep climb. The Corsair can easily outrun and outclimb me in a shallow climb, but we might be climbing at a steep enough angle that I can come closer. Now in such a chase there's of course always a chance that you're getting dragged, so I keep checking behind me to make sure no enemy plane comes in from behind. But all that's behind me is a friendly plane, a premium Vickers 490. That's bad news for the Corsair, since the Vickers 490 can probably follow him in a dive. As the Corsair slows down, I figure I'm as close as I'm going to get and start to attack. I figure either I do some damage or the Corsair dives away and then the Vickers 490 can do its thing. But I get a good hit on the Corsair's wingtip and it's out of the fight. So I look around for other planes to attack. At first I start to dive at the plane that I see above the beach, but it turns out to be another Zero, so I pull up again. But a bit further behind there is a furball going on, also on somewhat low altitude, so I start to fly there to get above it and dive on the fight below. With the focus on turning of Japanese teams, you often have low altitude furballs developing, which are easy to get above. As I get there I can spot the Hellcat below. At first I'm not sure if it is one of the AI Hellcats that are also around here often, but the way it flies is not typical for AI. It's a player and I start to dive down, planning to slot in behind him at close range. But the Hellcat pulls up right in front of me as I dive down on it. So instead of slotting in behind him and attacking from behind, I fire as the Hellcat pulls up in front of me. Now I don't know if I did much damage, and being in a Zero I could just turn right after this Hellcat and finish it off, and becoming slow and low and an easy target for random US fighters that happen to come by in the process. But I don't. I zoom up again to get above the fight again, and I can do another diving attack if necessary, but it isn't. The Hellcat takes enough damage and is going down. I came around to look for another target below, but all I can see for now was a Hayabusa, so I pull up again and start to climb. Now I see another fight going on out over the ocean on slightly lower altitude. Now here I can see a difference between what I would do in a P-38, like in the last video, and the Zero now. In the P-38 Lightning I would fly straight at this fight, to get there as quick as I can, building up the speed I want in a shallow descent towards it, attacking something as I fly through it and then zoom up. I came to the conclusion, however, that the Zero does not build up enough speed for that in a shallow descent, so in this case I aim to arrive above the fight and then dive straight down. That takes a bit longer, of course. As I get close enough to identify planes, I can see the typical twin-tail of a P-38 coming my way to my left and below, passing below me, followed by another plane which I can't quite identify yet. So I pull up to turn around in a loop to get above the P-38 as it comes past me and dive on it if it presents a good target after it. And it does turn around and come past me below me as I loop around. And I can build up enough speed diving towards it to get in fire range, and I aim for the wing, generally the area that gets you the best results. For twins I aim at the engine. I get a good burst into the wing which takes it off, and I pull back up to hopefully get above everyone and not get trapped in an engagement I can't get away from. As I pull up I can spot the second plane I saw after the P-38 earlier. Now I can see it is a P-47 Thunderbolt. and in a good position to attack also as it starts to turn and lose speed. However, I can see some tracer fire to my front, so I focus on that for a minute. If a friendly plane is in trouble there and I'm close enough, that would have priority, but as I take a closer look I can see that the enemy plane there is a bomber, a B-25 or something similar, and I won't go anywhere near those in a Zero if there are still fighters to attack instead. So I look around for other targets. There are a few fighters lower than me, and the Thunderbolt is coming past me again. Pretty low and in a slight climb, so not very fast either. If he would see me coming in time, he could still dive away and I could not catch the B-47 and would have to look for another target, but from the angle I'm coming down, I'm hard to spot, so I can get close diving on the climbing Thunderbolt, and again, as I get close enough, I aim for the wing. I fire a longer burst of cannon and machine gun into the wing, and eventually the wingtip comes off, and the P-47 goes down. As I climb again, I can spot some more planes to my left, closer to the island. I can't quite identify them yet, but I move that direction, slowly climbing a bit again and looking around for targets or planes that might come in to attack. I'm not as high anymore as I was at the beginning, having lost some altitude during the attacks. So by now there could be lots of enemy planes at higher altitude, something to look out for, but for now I can't spot anything on higher altitude. Now as I arrive above the island, there is a friendly plane, a Ki-61, under attack and chased by a Hellcat and the Navy P-25. I spot them as they pass below me, so I pull up to take a closer look to identify them as they come by. The Hellcat is in front, right behind the Ki-61, followed by the Navy P-25. I do a wing over to dive down after them. I dive down on the Hellcat in front, which I guess is easier to shoot down, and the Ki-61 can outturn the P-25 after the Hellcat is down. As I close in on the Hellcat, I want to slot in behind it, but just like the last one, as I get close enough, this one also pulls up as I come close, so I have to fire as it passes right in front of me. And again, I don't know if I did any damage as I fired, and I climb up again to get above the two enemy planes. I hope I did some damage, or at least scared the Hellcat off the Ki-61's tail. But as I come around again, I see that the Hellcat is still following the Hien, so I come down again for a second attack. This time I slot in behind the Hellcat and can attack from the rear. I maneuver a bit more aggressively this time though to get the shot. I get the Hellcat, but I lose a lot of speed in doing so after the Hellcat is down I can't climb up very high again. So I want to fly away from the scene and climb if possible before anyone else shows up. As I turn to the side to move towards the sea, I can see two planes coming my way from the front. A bit to my left. I assume they are enemy as they are coming straight at me, and I focus on them for now and start to evade a possible attack from the plane in front, which turns out to be friendly after all, unlike the P-38 that was diving in from behind, which I missed in the meantime. So I have to take evasive action and look around for the lightning that attacked from behind. The P-38 pulls up after his attack run and climbs away. I have to assume though that he will come around for another attack, so I keep an eye on the lightning as I slowly fly away. Against the higher and much faster lightning I can only evade his attacks and hope I can run him low on energy or that he makes a mistake allowing me to go on the offensive. I evade a second attack and the lightning pulls up again. I keep an eye on him getting ready for the next attack, but it seems the lightning either lost sight on me as he pulls up or lost interest and eventually starts to move away. So I start to climb again, keeping an eye on the lightning. I call for assistance as I am not sure yet if the P-38 comes back around. However, by that point there aren't really many friendly fighters still around. As it becomes clear that the lightning broke contact, I go into a bit of a climbing turn, intending to return to the island with an altitude advantage, since I can still see a few planes above the friendly airfield on that island and I assume by now most of them are enemy. As I keep focused on the planes over the island, I almost miss a Thunderbolt which is coming in from the front, and I can just barely duck below his fire. The Thunderbolt coming in from the front fires a burst above my cockpit as I push the nose down and passes above me, and then keeps going. I look back to keep an eye on the Thunderbolt, also assuming he will eventually come back around to attack again. However, it does not. The Thunderbolt keeps going and then eventually dives towards the island, soon ending up at lower altitude than I am on. So I eventually go back towards flying towards the island, hoping I can get above the enemy planes there. By now most of the friendly fighters are down, so I expect almost everything in the air to be enemy. I can spot a few planes on lower altitude and eventually also a few on higher. If this would have been the beginning of the match, I would gain some distance and try to climb above all of them, but our team is almost out of points and I expect that it will end before I could get something like this done. And I'm low on cannon shells as well, so I would have to fly back to the carrier and rearm first anyway. So I look for targets of opportunity right away to expend my last shells, and then, if the game hasn't ended by this time, to go rearm. As I arrive over the island, I can spot a lot of fighters close by, all enemy. I hope with so many friendlies around, they have trouble picking me out as the sole enemy plane on this altitude. As I get closer, I can see at least 2 P-38s, 2 single-engine fighters, as well as the bomber I saw earlier, as well as some AA fire at the beach indicating more planes there. I hope I can get above the group of enemy fighters and dive on one of them, but one of the enemy fighters, a Thunderbolt or a Hellcat, soon climbs up past me and ends up above me. I go after him, hoping he might not have spotted me and I can climb into range while the rest of the enemy team is out of range on lower altitude. So I go into a climbing turn after the enemy fighter, trying to climb up to his altitude. However, before I can get close to him, he starts to dive back down. I'm not sure if he has spotted me or for some other reason, but in any case I can't catch him in a dive. However, I do see a P-38 passing below me and I can dive on his tail. So I decide to go after the Lightning, hoping I can pick him off and cause a bit of confusion within the enemy team. I build up some speed and close in on the Lightning, and as I get close I aim for the wing again. Another plane comes in from the front just as I try to attack and fires a burst but misses, and I get a hit on the Lightning's wing just as it tries to turn out of the way, and it goes down, and I go up, looking around for other threats. Pretty much right away after I go up I can see a second Lightning coming in from the side, and I try to turn out of the way, though I take a slight hit on the wingtip, nothing serious though. This time, with so many friendly planes around, the Lightning does not just zoom climb away, but comes around right away, which gives me the opportunity to slot in behind the Lightning after evading the second attack. You just don't want to turn with a Zero, even with many friendlies around. The P-38 pulls up in front of me and I go after it, and as I get it within my sights, I fire a burst. But I run out of cannon ammo right away, so I can't finish this Lightning off. I try to get something done with the machine guns, but I have to turn out of the way to evade another enemy plane which is attacking from behind. This one a B-47 Thunderbolt attacking from behind. I do a few quick scissors to evade his fire and draw the Thunderbolt in closer, and eventually the B-47 overshoots, and I could go after him, but he is diving away and I'm not fast enough to follow him. However, there is a second Thunderbolt at slightly lower altitude turning my way, and I go up to do a wing over to go after the second Thunderbolt as it passes by me. I get behind this Thunderbolt, but I'm not as close as I would have hoped, not close enough to attack with machine guns, and as I level out I take a hit from another plane and my Zero is burning. Now, with the airfield close by I throttle down and I try to do an emergency landing there. Another plane comes in to attack another Thunderbolt, but I don't take much additional damage this time. The airfield is to my left and I start to dive towards it, and with the throttle at 0 the fire goes out pretty quickly and I can throttle back up a bit and get the flaps down to get ready to land. But then I take another hit and the fire starts again, which isn't helping at all. Neither is the fact that the runway is 90 degrees to the right from my current position. I turn towards it to line up with it and put the gear and the flaps down, but by now my wings don't really create much lift anymore. But oh well, what you gonna do? Let's line up the runway and here we go. That looks like a nice spot to park right there, and perfect landing. Topper Harley would be proud. Well, and this is it for this fight. As I've said at the beginning, while the Zero is fun to fly, I don't consider it that good a fighter, especially considering the opposition it will face in warthunder thanks to the battle rating system. The plane is just too slow. While it is a great turn fighter, pure turn fighting is just not the best way to do well, as it will get you in tough spots and make you an easy target almost every time. As far as Japanese fighters go, I consider the Ki-61 at this battle rating much more capable because of its higher speed, and further up of course the A6M3 Raiden, for example, is an amazing plane. The Raiden on 3.3 is beyond ridiculous, but with that battle rating I won't touch it. Well, and this is it for this video. As always, I hope it was entertaining, thanks for watching, and maybe I'll see you next time.